Alright, welcome in. I'm the Kodiak, and today I'm here to talk about what the Giants should do in the draft, but we have no time to waste, and I just want to tell you before I tell you to like and subscribe, if you're a Giants fan and they draft J.J. McCarthy 6th overall, I would highly suggest you find a new team to cheer for, because just think about this for a second. $40 million salary cap hit on Daniel Jones. And I know you saw the title of this video, but he is absolutely not the Giants quarterback of the future. But alongside a $40 million investment on Daniel Jones, if you put a 6th overall investment into McCarthy, along with a 6th overall pick into Jones in 2019, they still wouldn't have a good quarterback on their roster. And that's two 6th overall picks used on quarterbacks. But there's nothing off the table on a roster this bad. Although there's some needs I want to hone in on. If you think there's a chance on God's green earth that the Dan Wagon is the quarterback of the future, which he has shown to just not be that guy anywhere close to it. They didn't really have another option last offseason, so they offered him the largest prove-it deal ever, and he's just not NFL starting material. I want him to succeed. I kind of like him, but watching Daniel Jones play football for 90% of his career is like when you're watching a car accident that's so bad that you can't help but peek over at it. And this team has done really, really, really poor in the draft. And part of this is why I say that since the Browns are finally winning games, the Giants are the new look version of the 2000 to 2010 Cleveland Browns. The most impressive thing about Daniel Jones is that he's probably not even one of the worst Giants draft picks of this generation. You have guys like Kadarius Toney, who may be the worst wide receiver in the NFL. If it ain't happening with Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and a razor-thin depth chart in front of you, it's probably not going to happen. And if you remember, the only two teams that even had Kadarius Toney on their board were Dave Gettleman and Urban Meyer. So that says a lot about Kadarius Toney. You also have guys like DeAndre Baker, who seemed like he wanted to rob guys at a picnic more than he actually wanted to cover wide receivers. You have guys like Eric Flowers, who was Evan Neal before it was cool. Then he goes to your division rival and suddenly doesn't play like the worst offensive lineman in the league anymore. And then Evan Neal has the worst attitude ever and was a huge swing and miss, especially using 7th overall capital on him as well. Saquan Barkley, oh my god, we cannot talk about this pick enough. He was drafted 2nd overall by a team coming off a 3-13 season. So you have guys like Daniel Jones, and like I was mentioning, and now that I think about it, Daniel Jones is the worst draft pick of this modern era for the Giants because they invested 5 years into him, 8 years after we run off, or I say we as if I'm a Giants fan, after they run off his costly contract, and between the wasted time, the high pick used, the fact that he's a quarterback, yes, far and away the worst pick in the new era of Giants football. And that's impressive because we are spoiled for choice. But the bad news and the good news for the Giants is that everything is on the table here. The bad news is because this roster was left in a horrible spot by Dave Gettleman. And also, there's more bad news because the Giants ultimately still are lacking a lot of talent. And Shane hasn't done a great job at righting the ship. 2022 looks like more and more of a fluke every single day. They do not have a good roster. In my opinion, the second least talented team in the league, only ahead of the Broncos, and the only redeeming quality of this team is their defensive line. Also, no 2nd round pick this year because they traded it for Brian Burns. I love that, very solid move, but this team is spoiled for choice as far as need. You need pretty much every position besides D-line and left tackle. McKinney left in free agency, so you have holes in the secondary now. But one of the bright spots for this team is Deonte Banks and Cordell Flott. Banks are going to be closed on Sundays this year. But so that all being said, what should they do in the draft this year? Because you know Daniel Jones isn't the QB of the future, and this team should consider QB as one of their options. But honestly, I could see them just going into next year with the idea that they're going to get their quarterback next year rather than, pass up an uber talented player at 6th overall, because at 6th overall, you're not getting Daniels, you're not getting May, you're not getting McCarthy, or you are getting probably, I think McCarthy will be there. I meant to say you're not getting Williams, but if a guy like J.J. McCarthy is there, he's not really worth 6th overall capital. I think it's absolutely ludicrous that anyone's even considering taking him in the 1st round. So the other options are Bo Nix and Michael Penix, and those guys really, I think Nix is way better than Penix, but I probably wouldn't even take him until like the mid-1st. Even though he is, at this time, at this juncture, who I want my favorite team, the Broncos, to draft. That is what I think the Giants should do in this draft. They should do their due diligence on every prospect at every position, like every other team should, but at the same time, because you never know who's going to be available, and teams don't just scout for now, they scout for 3, 4, 5 years down the road, because you never know who's going to come available in trade, free agency, who's not going to get that second contract or whatever. But As far as the Giants and what I think they should do at 6, they got to go with a wide receiver here. And the good news for the Giants is that they're probably going to be looking at Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors, which is fantastic because I'm assuming that the top 3 in this draft via Chicago, Washington, and New England are going to be Williams, May, and Daniels. Not necessarily in that order. I mean, Williams at 1 is written in Sharpie, but not really sure the order that May or Daniels are going to go. So that leaves us with Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4 to the Cardinals. He is a carved from stone wide receiver 1. He came out of the womb as a wide receiver 1. Yeah. Weird analogy, but you know what I'm saying. And 5th overall, this is the real first toss-up of the draft because I could see teams preferring Odunze to Neighbors. But ultimately, I think a lot of people are going to, in the community, be more in on Malik Neighbors just because he did it earlier in his career, and early breakouts correlate very strongly to whether or not a guy can play well at this point in his career, or at least he's going to adapt to the NFL level better than a guy like Odunze, who was on a pretty poor Washington team his first 2 years. I know that Washington was really bad those times, but he's really turned it around over the past couple of years, and it's been amazing to see what he has become. But originally, when I'm thinking about what the Giants should do, they got to go Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors. So Rome Odunze is probably the most complete wide receiver in this draft. He is a complete alpha. He is a true number 1 receiver. He has upside through the roof, and he, in my opinion, is one of the reasons why a lot of people like Michael Penix and are in love with the idea of Michael Penix. But I think Rome Odunze was that whole offense. I think Odunze is going to be one of the reasons that Michael Penix gets drafted, similar to the way Evans was one of the reasons that Johnny Manziel was drafted. But yeah, awesome run blocker too. But what makes Rome Odunze amazing is that he can win at all 3 receiver positions. He can beat man, zone, and press. And I think arguing between Neighbors and Odunze is kind of a waste of time because they're both elite players. So that is who I think the Giants should go with in this draft. And yeah, let me know your thoughts if you're a Giants fan, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.